Welcome to the Mason Duchatschek Show. I created as a place where you can access expert ideas, strategies, and tools that can make you exponentially more valuable, if not indispensable, to the company you work for. And if you own a business, I want to help you make it much more profitable in the meantime and much more valuable for down the road so you can attract more offers and bigger offers faster if you ever decide to sell it. My favorite topics are obviously related to business, people, and the leaders who inspire them. My guest today is Jason Greer. He's the co-author of the book People Matter Most and a labor relations expert who's been featured in the Los Angeles Times, Forbes magazine, CNN, and others. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Mason, how are you, my brother?
I'm doing great. I invite you here today to talk about understanding the dynamics of labor relations and unionization. And I'd really like to focus on your experiences and observations regarding labor relations and the reasons behind union drives, if that's all right.
Yeah, no worries, man.
I've got some questions and would love for you to share your insights about why unionization happens, common issues, and the role of management in either preventing or fostering it. So are you ready to roll?
That's right, bro.
All right. What are the most common reasons you've observed for union drives within companies, and what patterns do you see in these cases?
Man, the age-old response would have been the most common reason why people decide that they want to go unions is because of bad management, because they're not paid enough. What we're seeing today is we're seeing more and more people because the workforce has changed. The workforce is younger. That demographic is digital natives. So they're more in connection with other people and other organizations that may be going through union drives. So what we're starting to see more and more is you can have employees who are treated relatively well. But if there's an employer that's down the street that's going through an organizing drive, or an employer across the country that's going through an organizing drive, we're just starting to see more what we call solidarity campaigns. So it really comes down to this. If you have employees who feel like the employer does not match their social values, that's one driver. If you have employees who feel like they have been disrespected, but not disrespected how it was, 20 years ago. Disrespect might mean something like, I just forgot to say good morning to you, and that hurts your feelings, right?
Gotcha.
And one of the other things that we're seeing is really, social issues, social justice issues are really starting to play a really big role in the fact that people are organizing. So it really comes down to those three things.
For those who may be less familiar with union organizing, can you talk about what a drive is? I mean, someone might say, well, what is a union drive? What's it about? What predicates it? What starts it? What's the purpose of it? Could you kind of explain to me like I've never heard of it before? How would you describe that to someone who's never been familiar with that type of labor issue?
Yeah, no worries. So before I became a labor relations consultant, I was a board agent with the National Labor Relations Board, which means that I was really a gatekeeper for the National Labor Relations Act, which gives employees the right to unionize. So here's how it generally works. In order for a group of employees, let's look at Starbucks. You have Starbucks, Starbucks stores throughout the nation are organizing. I think it started in Buffalo, New York, like in 2021 or 2022. And since then, they've had over 300 stores that have fallen prey to a union organization. So what happens is a group of employees will get together and they will say, we want to go union for a variety of reasons. In order for them to file what we call a petition with the National Labor Relations Board, the union needs to collect at least a 30% showing of interest, which means 30% of those employees need to sign either a union authorization card or a digital electronic authorization card via a union's website. Once they get that 30%, that is what we call the showing of interest, by which they can go to the National Labor Relations Board and file that petition. Once they file that petition, the National Labor Relations Board will alert the company that a petition has been filed, and then you will have the company and the union, with the board acting as, the buffer. They will come to terms of what we call a stipulated election agreement. A stipulated election agreement is just a fancy way of saying it's a contract that says the time, place, and date in which the employees are going to vote in the secret ballot election. Once we get to that election, and when I started in the industry, from the time the petition was filed to the time the employees voted, you were talking 42 days, right? 42 days of us working with the employees, talking to the employees, getting to know the employees. On the other side, on the other side, the union, we're talking to the employees too. So it's what we call a campaign.
Okay.
But unfortunately, that number has reduced from 42 to maybe 21 days, in some cases 10 days, right? At the
So
conclusion,
if a company doesn't see it coming and a union's prepared and
right,
have got their hooks into the working population at that company, an employer could be absolutely blindsided and have very little time to respond. Am I
I mean,
correct?
consider this, Mason. The first thing that a union is telling your employees is don't tell the employer because you don't want to get fired, right? By the time the vast majority of the companies that I've worked with, that my consultants have worked with, the first thing they say is, we didn't even see this coming. We didn't even know this would happen. It happens all the time.
Wow. So can you explain the labor relations maximum? I've heard you talk about this before. People
Yeah,
don't vote for a union, they vote against bad management. Can you
right.
expound on that and tell us a little bit about how it plays out in real life scenarios?
Yeah, it comes down to this. Look, I tend to think that I'm good. I tend to think that my consultants are good. And when I say we're good, I mean we're good at educating the employee as to both the pros and cons of being part of a union. But I think that ultimately, and I've seen this in my experience, I've been doing this for close to 18 years. In my experience, Mason, when people go in to vote, when the average employee goes in to vote, they're either going to vote for their manager or they're going to vote against their manager. They're not voting for me, right? They didn't know me prior to 42 days or 18 days ago. They are either voting for their manager because they feel like they have managers who understand them, care about them, love them, respect them. They're just having a momentary issue. It happens in all relationships. Versus those employees who go into the ballot booth and they vote against their managers because they feel like the managers treat them like garbage. They feel like the company treats them like garbage. And in my company, our maxim, and we say this in every single campaign, we say this in everything we do, Mason, is that people will work for money, but they will die for respect and they will die for recognition. But if you're a manager and you don't know what your employees need in terms of respect, and you don't know what your employees need in terms of recognition, you might as well just call up a union and say, hey, come in and organize them because that's what's going to
Now, I've known you for a very long time, so I know that companies hire you to come in and help
happen.
them manage the presentation of the company's perspective of why a union doesn't make sense.
Yes.
The union has employees that talk to a company's employees about why they should join a union.
Right.
I want to make sure that people understood that there are guys like you that come out and actually help companies with that process. Because I'm sure, matter of fact, better yet, tell me a story about a company who thought, oh, I can just handle it our own, handle it by ourselves. Because I'm sure some of them do that. Like, oh, that's okay, we can handle it by ourselves. How's that usually go down?
It rarely, if ever, works because, like, and I'm not saying that, in some cases, bringing a consultant is the right thing. In other cases, running a campaign through your managers is the right? But we had an experience 4 months ago with an employer. An attorney introduced me to the employer with the idea of my company coming in to help them with their union issues, right? The employer listened to our pitch. I thought it went really well. But ultimately, the employer's brain trust got together and they said, you know what? We don't need outside help. We can handle this on our own. Here's what happened, Mason. They called me 10 days before the campaign, 10 days before the actual vote. And they asked me, can you come in to work with our employee? I was like, you're only giving me 10 days. And here's what the general manager said. The general manager said, we thought we knew the employees, but we didn't recognize that we were the reason why the employees were considering voting in. Can you please come in and help? I turned them down because even if I meet with those employees for 10 days, it really comes down to the fact that this was not about joining a union. It was a referendum on the employer. You can't win. So we see companies do this, not often, but when they do it, they usually mess it up because they just don't know labor law. I mean, labor law and labor relations. It's such a niche, Mason. It's such a niche. It's like asking me to come in to handle your books. Bro, my superpower is communication. My superpower ain't counting. I don't know what I'm doing, you know?
Right, right. What kind of misconceptions do you think leaders have about why employees seek union representation? What are some of the
First,
common ones?
the first misconception is that the employee just want to get paid. Man, look, Mason, I'm 50. And I will tell you that the needs, the perspectives of a 50-year-old employee are vastly different than the perspective of a 20-something-year-old employee, right? And so you might have a case where you have someone with, I'm Gen X, right? So you might have people, when we're dealing with Gen X type populations of employees, yeah, they might say we want to get paid better. We hate the fact that they cut out the Christmas party. We hate the fact that we didn't get our bonus. But when you talk to employees who are in their 20s, man, they're saying things like, I want to be part of something bigger than myself. I want to know that I matter to the employer. So when you have employers who are thinking the only reason why these employees want to go union is because of money, 9 out of 10 times based on the demographics of the employees, that's the wrong answer. The second thing that I see employers make the mistake of all the time is assuming that the employees hate the organization. Man, within the past 2 years, I cannot count the number of campaigns that we've run or that we've gotten involved in where the employees will tell you straight up, we love our company. We love our managers. We love our pay. We love our benefits. We love our working conditions. It's incredible. But they all have this, Mason. They all have a cell phone. They are digital natives. What they're doing on a daily basis, whether it be TikTok, whether it be Instagram, whether it be, I'm not going to say Facebook because that's what old folks do, right? But whether it be whatever electronic or social media medium that they're using, they're voting because in some form, shape or form, they feel solidarity to other people who are going. The worst thing that happened to employers was the hashtag. And when you see a hashtag and that hashtag says union organizing, you see a hashtag that says union ready, you see a hashtag that says solidarity, please know that's changed the world.
Thank you. That's an eye opener. What are some critical early warning signs of discontent among employees that companies often miss?
When your employees stop talking to you, and I'm not just saying a day where employees are just having a bad day, but when you're going to them and they're not sharing their issues or concerns, that is a red flag. Another red flag might be watching employees. Your employees are generally speaking, I don't care what age they are, they're generally speaking on the phone all the time. You look at, it used to be when people took a smoke break, they'd actually go outside and take a smoke break and talk to each other. Now people take a smoke break and they're taking a smoke break, but they're on their phones, right? When you start seeing a level of communication that's happening digitally, and you're not included in that, that might be a warning sign. But in the end, Mason, and the fact that people can do things on the internet, it's harder and harder to pinpoint warning signs, right? Now, if you have a trained eye, you can pinpoint what we call union hotspot. We can see that all day long, but that dang near 20 years of experience to get to that point. But if you just happen to be a manager and you have 50 million things going on in your head and all seems right with your employees, and you have no idea what they're communicating with via their cell phone, via text messaging, via whatever. That's why that's why we see employers who get blindsided by this because they're like, we had no idea this was happening. But there is another telltale sign. Pay attention to, if you do employee opinion surveys or employee engagement surveys, pay attention to those surveys. Because if your survey results are like in the 80s, 70s and 80s, but you're walking through the facility and your employees have no morale, like the workplace morale sucks, it's a very good chance, because we've seen this happen, that the union has been coaching your employee on what to say on the engagement surveys, because they want the employer to believe that everything is right while they're organizing underneath.
Gotcha. How can management improve employee relationships to mitigate the risks of unionization?
Stop assuming that you know what the employees want and go directly to the employees. One of the beautiful things, look, people crap on Gen Z, they crap on millennials all the time. They talk about they're lazy, they talk about this, they talk about this, that, whatever. The reality is, millennials and Gen Z, to me, I'm in love with. I love those generations simply because they will tell you what's on their mind, but they just want to make sure that you're available to hear what they have to say. So if there are issues and concerns that they're struggling with, make sure you're the one listening to them. But it's not just about listening, it's about actually making sure that you are following through on those said issues and concerns.
Can you share a specific example of a unionization drive that you were involved in and maybe a little bit about what the lessons taught you?
Yeah. Been so many. I'll say that one of the things, I'll go back to my first major case. It was for this company called Brandywine Senior Living. And Brenda Bacon, my matriarch, who I talk about all the time, right? Brandywine was my first real big client. And I used to think that campaigns were all about you get the votes, you win the election, boom, you go collect your check, you go home. Brandywine taught me because I watched the way that Brenda Bacon loved on her employees. I watched the way her executive team loved on their employees. And what I came to realize was that labor relations was less about, the wins and losses, the votes, who's voting which way, who's voting which way. Labor relations was more about understanding that when, I don't care what the company's saying, I don't care what the union is saying, the people in the middle who truly matters. The title of our book is People Matter Most, and there's a reason why we called it. I started to realize that I cannot look at employees in terms of being candidates in a campaign, but I had to start looking at them as people. Because when you look at a bottom line on any, financial sheet, forget the numbers. You're looking at the hearts, minds, and souls of the people who helped you to drive those numbers. Brenda taught me how to take my ability to listen and make that into a superpower. Brenda taught me that an executive really has the power to show her employees that they care. Watching this woman, Nathan, look, I've counseled executives in every industry you could think of. I am the consultant to the kings and queens of industry. Brenda did something that I'd never seen before. We're in the midst of a campaign. This amazing, spectacular CEO comes in front of the employee. She takes her speech that she had prepared, she rips it up, puts it on the ground, and says, I want to talk to you. I'm not even going to bring up the union. I want to talk to you about you. And she went on talking about how much she cared about the employees. She went out of her way, Mason, to talk about and actually called employees by names and said, I remember the first day you started. And I remember the day that you contacted my company, that you contacted my executive offices because your husband had a stroke and you were wondering, how do we go about making sure that we have health insurance while you took time off from work to take care of it? He talked about the fact that in many cases, he refused to increase the amount of money, as health insurance is going up. The company continued to absorb that cost so that the cost was not borne by the employees. And then she did this, Mason. She posted her cell phone number and said, you all call me. It won't go to my secretary. It won't go to anybody else. It'll come directly to me. And I learned in that moment, Mason, that campaigns were not about the W's and the L's. Campaigns were about people. That's my biggest takeaway. That's why I do business the way that I do business, because it's about the heart. And that's what I learned in my first experience.
I've known you for a long time, Jason, and others who know you, when we talk about you when you're not in the room, we talk about your superpower. And I've always said that your superpower is to understand what people really mean, regardless of the words they use.
Yes, sir.
That is, and I know you've worked years to craft that skill, and I have seen it in action, and it amazes me.
Thank you.
What would you say to someone who owns or manages a business that says, that'll never happen to us? And they don't even realize that unionization is a threat or a possibility. What would you say to somebody like that?
Hey, you're the biggest idiot I've ever met. That's what I was saying. Because, man, I can't tell you the number of times I've heard employers say, I didn't think this could ever happen to us. Or they hear whispers of union organizing activity. The first thing they say is, it'll blow. It doesn't blow, because the reason why your employees, everybody wants to matter. See, you got to think about that. The vast majority of people don't want unions, because if social media has taught me anything, is that everybody thinks they have an opinion. Everybody wants to be seen. What that really is from a psychological standpoint is we want to make sure that we matter to other people, because that's what's important to us. What's important to our brains, Mason. So when I hear an employer say that'll never happen to us, well, if you ain't making your employees feel like they are kings and queens, if you ain't making your employees feel like they matter, if you ain't making your employees feel like they're part of the reason why you're able to do the things that you've been able to do within your industry, and you don't recognize them, you don't respect them, it's going to happen to you tomorrow. And it might not just be a union organizing drive. Watch this. It might be a bunch of zombie employees who show up every single day. They clock in, they clock out. They ain't giving you anything extra. They ain't bringing the skill, they ain't bringing the heart, they ain't bringing the will. They are simply doing what is required. And that is killing your bottom line. You don't even see it. So when I hear employers say it'll never happen to me, cool. I'll give you my phone number. Call me in 2 months when it happens.
Right. It's, it's funny you talk about zombie employees because you've seen the Gallup surveys where they talk about engagement levels, and there's so many people that literally just sleepwalk through the day, doing enough not to get fired.
Yes, sir.
And it's accepted. And so I understand what you're saying there. Look, Jason, I appreciate everything that you shared. As we wrap up, if someone wanted to know more about you, your company, what you do, and how you help others, what's the best way for them to reach out to you, to connect with you, to learn more about you? How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, great question, Mason. Go to my website, hiregci.com. Again, that's hiregci.com. You can reach me on Instagram, Jason.Greer. You can definitely reach me on LinkedIn. I spend more time on LinkedIn than I spend anywhere else. Look me up on LinkedIn. I pretty much match with or I accept with everybody because I love the dialogue. But definitely go to my website. You can definitely go to LinkedIn because that's where I'm present every single.
Great. Jason, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom and your time. It's been a pleasure having you, and we'll catch up, and hopefully we'll have you back again soon. How about that?
Hey, as always, Mason, appreciate you, man.
Thank you.